Good morning, Christina.
Good morning, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, absolutely.
We're excited to learn more about it and to hear what you have to say.
Okay, no problem.
Now, do you have your presentation to screen share?
Yes, I can. Okay. Is it? Yep. Okay.
Okay. Because otherwise I did put the other one that you had done at the MDA conference on my laptop in case we needed to do it that way too. So
just pull that up.
Everything's all set on my end.
Okay. Here we go. Fantastic. Okay, so I'm assuming everybody here today is our board members, correct?
Yes, we have our board members here and John Hobbins from the city.
Okay.
But we're not, I don't know if we're ready to start yet, Jeremy. Do you want to call the meeting to order?
Let's call this to order and run through our first couple agenda items. So at this point, we're going to call the April 22nd, 2021 DDA work session to order. Roll call, Becky, you can just take note of who's here, who's absent. I'm sure at this point, do we have any unexcused absences we need to be aware of?
Mike is not joining us today, but he has given me notice already, so I wouldn't consider him unexcused.
Okay. Can I get a motion to excuse the absent people, please?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to excuse the people that couldn't attend today.
Support.
We have a motion and support to excuse the absent people. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Thank you so much. Okay, let's move to public comment. I don't have anyone in the waiting room. Am I right about that, Sean and Becky?
That's correct.
Yep.
Okay, great. Let's go ahead and get to our presentation. I know we're all excited about it, so let's let's hear it all.
Okay, well, I would like to do a quick introduction of our presenter today because we're very, very fortunate to have with us my esteemed colleague, Christina Shepard-Degius. She is here to share her vast knowledge and expertise on TIF development. She's the founder of POW Strategies and also is Downtown Dearborn's executive director. She's very well known for her time at the Ferndale DDA as executive director, where she was for 15 years and had really astounding success with revitalization of downtown Ferndale. Among several boards and committees, she is currently serving as the chairperson for the Michigan Downtown Association. And it's actually at an MDA annual conference that I heard Christina speak on TIF, development, expansion, renewal. So it was a natural fit when we started our conversations. I reached out to her for her professional expertise and guidance in this area. And thankfully, she was agreeable to being here today, and we're very lucky to have her. And Christina, I will turn it over to you for your presentation, and then we'll follow it up with some Q&A.
Okay,
so
great. Well, thanks for that introduction. And always so nice to be able to get around to different areas of Michigan. And even though we're doing this virtually, it's really nice to learn a little bit more about what is happening in other communities, because we do all learn from each other. And as the MDA chairperson, you know, that is also one of our goals, is to really help strengthen each other. You're not in this alone. I think sometimes you might feel like you are a little bit, but know that you're not, because it is being done in other places. And that's the benefit of, really, learning from each other, is how to do it a little bit better, maybe within your community the next time, and so on. It looks like my video keeps kind of going out, so I'm going to just turn off my video, so hopefully it doesn't affect the presentation. There we go. Okay, so and I'm assuming that everyone on the board understands what tax increment financing is, obviously, because you already have tax increment financing for other portions of your DDA. But I see that we are Facebook Living this, but tax increment financing is the ability for the DDA to use a tool. It's a tool that the DDA can use for funding purposes. And that funding comes from the properties within the DDA itself, the boundaries of the DDA, or the tax increment financing boundary, whichever is, if it is different, which in your case, it is different currently. And with tax increment financing, it's incremental increase in the taxes that are collected, that are generated and put back into the TIF area of the DDA. So for instance, and I always use this as an example, let's say a property is paying in taxes in 2000, they paid $1,000 starting in 2000. And now, 21 years later, they're paying $1,500. That $500 difference is what the TIF collects for the DDA to be able to utilize. But the value of tax increment financing is that it really helps you as a DDA to improve the quality of life for the community. The opportunity to create a sense of place and develop your district or your TIF area with an environment that is inviting, as well as a place where residents and visitors alike can really feel comfortable coming to, but also helping to support your local businesses. And really that's the, the overall intent is that you're supporting your business and your properties and property owners. And that support will then spur new or reinvestment from those property owners, increasing property values around the area. Items that tax increment financing can support include infrastructure improvements, streets, sidewalks, lighting, sewer, water, also public gathering spaces, parks, revitalizing vacant buildings or underutilized properties, also helping to rehabilitate historic buildings, or helping to fill in development areas where you might have vacant land with housing. You also, as a DDA, can utilize tax increment financing for business recruitment and retention programs, incubators, safety, security, and maintenance throughout your district, as well as marketing and promotions. I need to move this a little tad, sorry, so I can see it. There are a number of things as a DDA that you can do when looking to either renew a TIF or to create a TIF. And I know that this, this presentation kind of takes in both accounts, but know that the process still would be the same process. One thing to note, that as a DDA, you can have separate tax increment financing areas as part of your DDA. There are instances, and Ferndale was one of them as well, and Dearborn has a situation in the East Downtown as well, where the TIF boundary is separate or different from the DDA boundary. And in Ferndale, we were actually looking at creating secondary TIF areas in order to support the overall DDA in later in life. So when it was originally created, it did not cover the entire area of the DDA. You can enter into agreements with adjoining municipalities or qualified townships to jointly administer your authority. You can also enter into agreements with taxing jurisdictions to share a portion of the captured assessed value of the district. So that might be one thing you should keep in mind as you're working through this process of potentially an additional TIF area, or if you're looking to, and I know you're still vacillating, do we open this up or do we do a secondary TIF area? But I'm going to tell you why you want to do a secondary TIF area. But really, in terms of that sharing portion, sometimes what we found across the state of Michigan is that taxing jurisdictions such as the county might want to limit how much of that tax increment financing they're willing to share with a new tax increment financing area. Also keep in mind that library millages prior to 2017 may exempt all or a portion of its taxes from capture. So if you are looking to create this new TIF area, that is something that you need to be aware of as well. And really what I would say about, whether you're looking at doing, opening up your tax increment financing area versus creating a new one, the rule of thumb is that if you open up the boundaries of your tax increment financing or expand it, in other words, you are then resetting your base year for your original tax increment financing because you are changing the boundaries. And as I would recommend to all DDAs is it will be much better for you to keep your existing tax increment financing area. Don't open that up, but to create a secondary TIF area, or if you're looking at multiple other areas, then that TIF area will have its own base year versus your original TIF area. Okay. It also, with especially if you are contending with the library millage item, that could be an area, or even with that sharing with the other taxing jurisdiction, it would only be that TIF area that would be affected by that, as opposed to your original area. Okay. These are just a couple other quick notes regarding tax increment financing plans. Just know that they cannot be abolished or allowed to expire if there are still bonds that have to be paid on. And then also in 2010, the authority is exempt from all taxation on its earnings or property. So if you're earning interest on anything, you are exempt from all taxation from that. Also, as part of Public Act 57, business incubators are allowed, as well as catalyst development projects. These were some new things that were added into the law and further defined. And catalyst projects do require a little bit more work on your tax increment financing plan. And I will, next slide kind of speaks to that a little bit. So if you are looking at doing a catalyst development project, you have to keep in mind that it must be approved by the Michigan Strategic Fund within 45 days of submission. However, if you, and then what I should say, it should be submitted within 45 days. It doesn't preclude you, though, however, from approving your tax increment financing plan if they have not approved it or rejected it within that time period. You just have to make sure that you are staying with that time period for that submission. But in that catalyst project plan, you would have to include these items that are on the screen, but including the maximum amount of bonded indebtedness to be incurred, the duration of it, your statement of impact of the TIF, and really what is the plan itself? What is the project that you are working on?
Could you, like, what would be an example of a catalyst development project?
I would probably say, let's say, for instance, you have a significant building project that's happening, whether it's maybe like a mixed use housing or, a mixed retail development for, potentially maybe it's for an entire block and you're redeveloping it, and that your tax increment financing is going to be helping to help that project, like with streetscapes around it, water, sewer, any other infrastructure that might be supporting the nature of that project. So in particular, sometimes with tax increment financing plans, whether you're amending them or creating a new one, you might only have like one sole project in mind. So that is really what those catalyst projects I think are intended for.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I know you also had questions regarding Citizens Advisory Council. And this would be for DDAs that have over 100 residents. And you would need to establish your Citizens Advisory Council to review and to help develop your TIF plan. And I know that, Rebecca, I believe you have a little more detail from Robert, I believe, from Rob on that. So I think his detail will help you to make sure that you're hitting that on point in terms of the timeline for that. But what I would say is that please keep in mind when you're establishing that Citizens Advisory Council, that will back up your timeline overall in terms of approving that tax increment financing plan. So, keep in mind, you have to, establish who is going to serve on that council, and then as well as pulling them together to review the plan, and then through the planning process itself and the adoption with council.
Okay, how many people should be on that, Christina?
I don't think they specify that in the law, actually. I will verify that, but I do not recall them specifying.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it was like a certain percentage of the residents you would have in your district, or I can look into that as well. I was just curious. We have 358 residents for what it's worth, so.
Well, and if they're, I know that there isn't a percentage that they list in the law. However, any type of advisory council, what I would say is, good advisory councils are going to have probably somewhere around, 8 to probably 15 members. Anything larger than that could become very difficult to manage as an advisory council.
Understood.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like with any board, right? But I think the commitment is really what you're looking for, is making sure that, those 8 to 15 people are very committed. They are attending. They are also have a role and a responsibility to not just to attend those meetings, but also to be able to report back to those other residents within your community. So, identifying residents who have that ability to either create kind of that neighborhood conversation or association to some extent, or perhaps, I'm not sure what types of residential areas you have, but if you have like condo associations, making sure that, someone from the condo association is on that advisory council.
Great, that's good advice.
What if you can't get enough people to fill the advisory council?
Well, and I think that would be then dependent on what you're setting as your minimum. I think that because the law does not specify how many, I think you have some flexibility as to what that actually entails. But I would really work with your council and your other departments within the city to make sure that the number that you do have at the table is going to be supported at the council level. I think that's the important part. So if you get to the end of all this in terms of your planning and bringing the plan forward, and you have someone or multiple people on your council saying, well, you didn't really have that many people then on your advisory council, you need to go back to the drawing boards, then you're in that situation where you're going to have to go back to the drawing boards and try to get more people on board. So, try to preempt that, making sure that, if you've run into those issues, activate those other council members to maybe help you to navigate and find other active participants for the council, or if they agree that that number is going to be sufficient for when the plan is approved.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I did reach out to Paul Balconi already, just so everybody's aware, and he is interested in serving on the council. So I know we have at least one. And of course, we have Mark, our own board member, so he would qualify, I suppose, right, as a citizens council. So I think we'll be able to find a sufficient number.
Yeah. Yep. And also keep in mind that, they do say for the life of the plan, right, you're supposed to have that advisory council in place. So the members could change along the way. It doesn't have to be the same people who started the advisory council.
Okay, that's good to know too, because we do have a number of shorter term residents, I would say, just because of our proximity to the university. So for example, if there's a university student who is interested in being on this council, they could take that on even if they weren't planning on being here for the entire duration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
That's good to know too. This is very informative, Christina. Thank you.
Oh, good. Well, and I know it's very dry content. So I appreciate everyone, staying on point, following along.
But it's very important. So I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Oh, yeah. No. Oh, yeah.
but
This is the most important stuff. Okay, so in terms of the components of your TIF plan, I know that you've already worked through your downtown development plan in this area. What you would need to do for the TIF plan is obviously it would need elements of the background and the purpose for it, your existing conditions, including population, land use, and infrastructure. It should also obviously include your boundary area, any demolition, repair, alteration plans, new construction infrastructure, marketing promotions. Usually you want to allow for as much flexibility within your TIF plan as you can as well. So, don't set up a TIF plan that, in 3 years or 5 years, when a project comes down the line, it doesn't fit within your TIF plan to be able to support. So, definitely look at other plans across the state in terms of language for that, that flexibility. You do want to have probably some very specific projects that you've already identified in your development plan to be included in it, or as you work through this process, even with the Citizens Advisory Council, maybe there's things that come to light or come to fruition in that specific area that makes sense to include in that TIF plan, but don't limit it to just those items is what I'm, really trying to say. Also include, any zoning changes that might be recommended, as well as you will need to estimate costs and funding. And I think sometimes that might even be the most difficult or most challenging part, is estimating those costs and potential funding for that.
Why might the development area and TIF area be different boundaries?
Well, the DDA, sometimes going through that process, and because a lot of times these DDAs were established 20, 30 some odd years ago, there could have been property owners that came out and said that they didn't want to be a part of the area. So they may have excluded them as part of the TIF, but didn't exclude them as part of the DDA. We have also seen it where some DDAs established it where they, because there was other outward constrictions. Perhaps the county said, well, no, we only want to allow for this smaller area, but you can utilize the funds that you collect in that smaller area for the whole DDA. So depending on how your plan is written, you may be able to utilize those funds in that non-TIF area. We've actually just encountered this issue really with Dearborn's DDA for its East DDA. But based upon how the plan was written and the terms, so like the terms meaning the terminology of the words, we are able to utilize those TIF dollars for the non-TIF area. However, when you look at the DDA as a whole, do you think that's a fair way of utilizing funds across all properties? I would say that all board members would probably agree, no, that's not the most fair way to do it. So that's why that additional TIF area is still needed to be set and established. And I think really, other than that, it may have been even in a case, perhaps you got to the table and you already had your TIF and your DDA area set, and someone said, you know what, we need to expand the DDA down to this area, but then didn't also think to expand the TIF area down to that area as well. There's a variety of reasons. Sometimes you might be able to find it in the old minutes, but I can attest, based upon the two cities that I've worked with here, there usually isn't a whole lot of background.
And to add to that point, we do have that situation here where if we look at our existing DDA district boundaries as opposed to our TIF district, it is, like Christina was saying, almost the same, except that there are a couple parcels, where it's outlined around certain properties for whatever reason, back when it was mapped out. In fact, I have a map that I could share with the board that is kind of an overlayment of the TIF district as compared to our DDA district, which is rather interesting to see. And of course, we have also the other situation that you were just talking about, Christina, where our DDA district was expanded in 2011 to include that 3rd Street corridor, but the TIF district was not. So that's one of the primary reasons that we're here today having this conversation, is exactly like you said, because we have the TIF from our core downtown and we're spending some of those dollars on 3rd Street because it is all part of the DDA district. But again, is that equitable? And so that's why we're looking for this additional TIF to have that funding mechanism to be forwarding all of those plans for 3rd Street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think definitely in your case, I think probably looking at, how you've expanded the DDA, probably a need or a call from the community saying, hey, we really feel that this part is really also part of the should be part of the DDA, is a part of our downtown. It needs to be included, but when you start to go into the legality of expansions of DDAs, you then realize that if you expand your TIF, you're resetting your base year. So
Right.
many boards then go, okay, well, we'll expand the DDA and then maybe we'll figure out what we're going to do with that area in terms of funding down the road. So, I think that probably is probably more common, across the state. And, you do have multiple opportunities for different types of funding for that area. However, tax increment financing is, probably the number one choice for most DDAs. Your secondary choices are additional taxes for businesses and property owners. And that's not always an easy thing to sell. As I think we're all probably pretty aware.
Yes, definitely.
I have a question. Is it a recent development for as far as TIF districts go, for there to be an expansion of adding a second or third district in your TIF area as opposed to reopening the district? I mean, because to me, it seems like this must be something that's somewhat new, because I'm just kind of baffled on why, for instance, Marquette, our DDA, why we wouldn't have just added a district years ago.
I don't think so. I think that, over probably the last 10 to 15 years, I have seen many DDAs across the state, as they are growing and having success with their original DDA area. That success breeds, people wanting to see more of that and that growth of the downtown area. So I think that's really what you're seeing, is that DDAs are now being successful in revitalizing the downtowns, and that growth is desired by the community, by the city, and it's really more acknowledged as the fact that, hey, this is really more part of our DDA area. So I think those expansions are occurring because of that. The way that the law is written, I think, is kind of holding up DDAs to be able to then streamline tax increment financing. And, that relates back to the fact that, your tax increment financing is not just coming from the city, it's also coming from other taxing jurisdictions. So your county, other jurisdictions who would otherwise receive those dollars. So that's why the process of approval is so critical, because you need to have that buy-in and that understanding, because they're saying, yes, we're allowing you to capture a portion of the dollars we would otherwise receive from development in this area. However, our position is always, as the DDA, is development in those areas would not occur without the support and help of the DDA.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Christina, I have a question. Getting back to the library exemption that you had mentioned earlier. Are they still able to opt out even if we aren't amending the DDA district boundaries?
Yes, because it's the TIF plan. So keep in mind that it's a difference between the DDA and a TIF plan. Those are two separate things. However, many communities adopt them at the same time. But since, what I would recommend is that you have a separate TIF plan for this one.
Mm-hmm.
And then that way it only allows them to be able to opt in or opt out of that TIF plan, not the other one.
Okay, thank you.
So Christina, are you saying also then that individual businesses could opt out of this if they wanted to?
Well, individual businesses could come to council and say that they don't want to be a part of it, which could modify your boundaries potentially. So I think really the importance there would be going back to your property owners to make sure that they truly understand that this isn't, tax increment financing isn't going to cost them anything more. They pay their same taxes. It's really on the back end as how those taxes then get divvied up and then reinvested into your district. So, making sure they understand that element. Now, if you were looking at creating a special assessment or a 2 mil levy for that area, those would be additional taxes where, it could be an area where a property owner might have apprehension and saying, I don't want to be a part of this TIF area. But generally, they can't say necessarily, the property owner can't opt out, but they can voice their concern with being in that area to council. And then what I've seen, and I think what you see in some of these older DDA areas, is when that has occurred, they have shrunk the TIF area or the DDA area or the TIF area to meet that request of that property owner. So if they don't want to be in it, they shrink it down. Now, it cannot be a property that is in the middle of your entire district. It could be a property that's more at the end, at one end or the other, because you would have to have a contiguous district. But you
So
can have,
then
you can have some minor carve-outs. Let's say, for instance, you still hold the line on the north side of the street, but the south side isn't included. But I can tell you, looking at that in future years as a board, how do you manage that, and how do you, let those property owners know is that, we can't invest in this area on this side of the street versus that side of the street because of how the boundary was established, 5, 10, 20 years ago. I can guarantee you that you'll have businesses and property owners just going, I just don't understand that because they were not a part of that process back then.
Good point.
So then you're also saying that individual taxing entities can tell you where they want the development district to be?
So taxing jurisdictions can opt in or opt out because it's a new TIF plan. So they have the opportunity to do that. However, when you're just doing your TIF plan renewals, they cannot opt in or opt out at that point because it's already a plan that's in place. But with a new TIF plan, they can opt in or opt out. What I would also say to speak to that specific question, can they determine the boundaries? I think that your job is to really educate them on the importance of why these boundaries are needed and to hear from them as to whether or not they feel that that needs to be modified in any way and why. But I think in most instances, like a county might not necessarily argue a specific parcel or property, but they may argue the validity of the entire length of a district. They might say, is that really part of your DDA? I mean, is that really part of your downtown? Does that qualify as downtown? Or are you expanding your boundaries so far out that, it has no real, I think, visual presence that it is part of your downtown. And I think that's what sometimes gets called into question, not necessarily small individual properties within a area. And you've already defined it as part of your DDA plan. So I don't think that going to the county and saying, hey, we want a TIF area for this part of our DDA plan, I would probably not think that counties, individuals would be opposed to something like that. They would be more opposed if you were looking at, taking your DDA and your TIF a couple more miles down the road.
But you are recommending a new TIF plan though, right? That was what you were recommending before in those two different areas?
Based on what I've read and everything that you have in place, I absolutely would recommend a secondary TIF plan for that area. Do not create it as, do not open up your existing TIF plan. Mainly because if you're changing the boundaries of your TIF, then all the other things apply. The county could opt out. The library could opt out. You might have to do revenue sharing with the county or other taxing jurisdictions. So those are the things that, protect what you have in place. And you are, really trying to establish a new area and develop that area. And although you might not have the accumulation of funds right away, from that TIF area, you still do have your existing TIF that can help to support it during that period of time. And or, you might even be able to say work with council on any special projects for shorter term projects that might help to spur growth and development in that area.
I would agree with that recommendation because that's been my biggest concern going into this, is not at all wanting to jeopardize our existing TIF downtown. So I do think creating an entirely new TIF for Third Street is the way to go. That brings up another question that I had, Christina, as far as the duration of the TIF plan. Now, our current TIF plan for the core downtown expires in 2036. So with the creation of this new TIF plan, is it beneficial to try to keep them aligned within that time frame, or have them be completely separate? Should like, for example, this new Third Street TIF, should we have it expire at the same time as the other one so the renewal process can be done in conjunction, or are we looking at two completely separate time frames and renewals down the road?
I don't think it's necessary that you align those. That would be a really short duration for a TIF plan.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking 15 years.
Mhm.
So, generally your TIF plans are at least 20, sometimes more. You could align it in the sense of, when you go to do your renewals, then it does make that process easier for you, but you might want to give a little more time to this new TIF plan to let it grow before having to go back for renewal.
Right. Okay.
Because I think what you want to be able to do is show the value of what you can do with it.
Well, I agree. You definitely should create a new one then. You don't want to jeopardize what we already have. But at the same time, then everyone could opt out of this if they wanted to. Correct?
Correct.
So that's going to be a big issue. If we're going through all this and then everybody decides, well, we don't have to do this, so we're not going to do it. We want to get those taxes.
Right. That's why it's our job to sell it.
Yeah.
To make sure we have that support, throughout the planning process, so we don't get to that point and then have people opt out.
Right.
I thought, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought Mike said that since it was going to be another TIF plan, in addition to what we already have, that they weren't going to be able to opt out. But I could have misheard him or be thinking wrong, but that's not correct, Christina?
Any new TIF plan, they would be able to opt out. If it's a renewal of your existing TIF plan, then they would not be able to opt out. But a renewal cannot include an expansion of boundaries.
Christine, I just have a question on this. I mean, you've done this before and have experience, doing this. And obviously our 3rd Street portion of the DDA has been established for a while. I mean, in my head, I can't see why the county or anyone else would want to opt out. I mean, to me, it seems like bad publicity, especially if we sell it the correct way, saying this is to promote the growth of our downtown and put money back in where it needs to go. I mean, do you have experience where places have actually opted out?
Well, I know that in some areas, counties have, with some of the newer TIF plans with, like, say, corridor improvement authorities, which, very similar to a DDA. It's just a different type of authority, but they use tax increment financing just the same. We've had some counties opt to 50% of their what would be the portion that they would normally pay. We have also found that some other communities don't have any issue because they have they have a good working relationship with the county. And your county is usually going to be your biggest partner in this, right? Because they usually contribute the second largest portion of that capture. Your first largest portion is really your city. So, making sure that your partnership with your city and preceding this is that they're also in there helping you without those county conversations, and really, showing the value and the need for this new TIF area. And I think with, with Oakland County, when we were doing this for Ferndale, and ours was very, it was unique. Our DDA and our TIF area, we're on a T in terms of our design. We have, 2 major cross streets, and every end of those cross streets was not part of the TIF area. So we had 4 ends that were not part of the TIF. And so when we went in to renew our TIF, that was part of our goal, was to then also create a secondary TIF areas. We actually were looking to create 4 other TIF areas. And, we met with the county, sat down, walked through it. We, really pushed with them in terms of like how successful we've been, which they knew because, we were part of the Main Street program there. But also to show what we were looking to do with those areas. What's the vision? What's the goal? And what's the potential for value and growth in those areas? And what does that mean overall to the community? And they were absolutely on board. By the end of those conversations, they gave us a few notes of things that they would like to see. And then typically, when you send out your notifications, I know our county would automatically send out, a automatic response is that they would opt out until they have until there's a public hearing. So a lot of times they send out a kind of a generic letter. So don't be concerned about that, but you want to make sure that then they are coming back to those meetings and those public hearings along the way with that TIF plan. Because usually what they're looking for is they're looking for that final TIF plan before they opt in or opt out. For Ferndale, it ended up that we did not actually institute those additional TIF areas because the city decided that it didn't want to pursue it and take on the onus itself to really invest in those areas, which was, unique, but we went through a 12-month process of, working through this with the city and the county. And in the end, that was the decision of the city. And, as a DDA, we were then, very much in line with them, because what they were saying is, we will invest the dollars into those areas. If you need support in those areas, it won't be coming from the DDA. It'll be coming from the city in order to do those projects and those programs. I think mostly what you were seeing is that then the city at that point in time wanted to see the growth into their general fund as opposed to into the DDA fund, but they were willing to make the investment to make those things happen.
Great. Christina, I'm noticing here that we still have some more slides, and I'm appreciating the conversation, and it's very valuable, but I also want to be respectful of what you've put together here for us. So why don't we move forward with the rest of your slide presentation, and then if we have additional questions at the end, we can get to those, if that sounds acceptable to everybody.
Okay, so I did skip ahead a little bit since we were talking about the other taxing jurisdictions. But some of the things in terms of telling your story, as I mentioned, showing your plan, and really literally sit down with your representatives. Don't make this a, don't do this via mail. Don't do this via email. Do this in a very personal meetings, one-on-ones that help to get the right people at the table in order to support your plan. And obviously, when they have input, listen to it. You might have to go back to the drawing board a little bit and modify your plans to make sure it includes the things that they're looking for. And what I would say is also, just in case, have that plan B there. So, is there a reduced capture percentage that you would be agreeable to? I don't know if you would necessarily change your boundaries because you're trying to adjust, really impact that 3rd Street area. But in the latter really doesn't apply. That's in terms of renewals and for resetting base years. But you're really looking for a new base year with that tax increment financing plan. So I think making sure that you're articulating that with them as well. And then, as I mentioned, show off your current successes. So how many dollars have you invested in the area? How many housing units or new businesses? What's the value that you have brought to the community, over the time of your DDA? And make sure that you kind of show it off in pictures as well, because not everybody likes to just look at words and numbers. And it really helps to kind of sell what you're doing as well. And engage your residents in this process too. Making sure that, with that Citizens Advisory Council, I think that's an important part where, they can also speak to the importance or the value of helping that 3rd Street area. So, make sure that those who are engaged and involved are from 3rd Street as well. I'm going to jump back up just to, I know you had questions about whether to do this internally or to bring on a consultant to do it. And, obviously, there's a lot of work that goes into doing whether it's a DDA plan or a tax increment financing plan. By all means, yes, a staff person can do it, but what are you giving up in terms of that staffer's time to be able to concentrate and really help to drive this through? Because your staffer overall is going to have to, help to lead those conversations and coordinate, the county meetings, the city meetings, the Citizen Advisory Council meetings, but to sit and actually write the plan and put the plan of action together, you may want to have someone outside of your organization outside of your staff or your board to really provide maybe those secondary eyes to the plan and other ideas and innovation to be brought to that tax increment financing plan. Now, I know that with your DDA plan, you had identified a few items already within that. I think you have a good basis and you could probably expand upon that with some community meetings. But then it's, putting, numbers together and collecting the inventory for that area. And I don't know how far along you are in terms of inventorying those properties, but you'd have to have that as part of your overall plan. So I don't know if that brings more questions there. This really spoke to the renewal process, but it is the same thing with tax increment with new plans. This latter portion on this slide, the secondary, this third column. So just keep in mind that it must be published, posted, and mailed at least 20 days before the hearing, but not more than 40 days. So, don't get ahead of yourself. And then it has to be in twice in the newspaper, in 20 conspicuous places in the public, mailed to all the property taxpayers, and then certified mail to the governing body for each taxing jurisdiction. And I do say certified mail because then you can guarantee that they have received it. We also, I believe in Ferndale, we may have also done certified mail for all the property taxpayers as well, just to make sure that every taxpayer received it. And we didn't have, because there are some of those absentee landlords that you'll never be able to get a hold of. And we wanted to verify that that property did receive it. Because we didn't want that question to come up at council. So, but one important note though, is that, and that's why I asterisked it, failure of a property taxpayer to receive the notice shall not invalidate the proceedings. It could only just cause concern of council members or, perhaps other jurisdictions to say, oh, well, if these people didn't receive it, then what's the validity of it? Did we do our due diligence and notify taxpayers appropriately? That's why we went the extra step to kind of say, yep, we're doing certified mail for all properties. Other than that, I will kind of just open it up to other questions. I believe that one of the things that we did to kind of sell our story is, we did have a lot of community input sessions. So really making this the community plan as opposed to a plan that's just developed by a consultant or just developed by internally by staff, and then all of a sudden, ta-da, there's a plan. So, making sure that you're engaging people in the process. We also really help to inform people about what is tax increment financing, what is a DDA, and what's the value of it. And I know back in Ferndale, this flyer or brochure, it was also kind of helpful to show people how tax increment financing, what's the makeup of it. So from your assessing department, you should be able to get that, or your finance department, you should be able to get that breakdown. So with your tax increment financing currently, there's a percentage that comes from the city, a percentage that comes from the county, and then probably a couple other taxing jurisdictions that you might have. So, showing what those percentages are. That was also a helpful tool with the county too, because I think sometimes the impression is that when you create a tax increment financing area and you're going to capture the incremental increase, they see big dollar signs that are going to be lost. But in reality, I think the overall amount is much smaller than they anticipate. Like at our county level in Ferndale at that point in time, I believe we were like right around 11% was coming from the county of that total tax increment financing capture. So, doing the math on that helps you to kind of sell it in a couple different ways, I think. And then we just sold it with stories, talking about what we were doing, what we had, where we had been, where we're at, and then where we're looking to go as well. So I'll close that out.
Anyone have questions at this point?
Jeremy, I do.
Yeah, Tony, go ahead.
Maybe more of a comment and partial question. Rebecca, we talked in the past about 3rd Street and what money we, I guess, took in as a DDA from 3rd Street. And I remember the number of 17,000. Is that correct?
It's about 19,000,
So
and that's through
my
the 2
concern
mills.
my concern is as we go down the road and if we look at a TIF for 3rd Street, a separate TIF for 3rd Street, we deliver a lot of services for the $19,000, I think, at 3rd Street. So what's the incentive for 3rd Street businesses to say I'm in on this when I already have the services that I want? For instance, it's music on 3rd and different venues, the cars. So I think that's part of our selling as time goes on. We should have a really good structured sales pitch, so to speak, that would go on so that there isn't a lot of opposition. I could understand where opposition could come from on 3rd Street when we're already giving them, I think, a lot of services for the $19,000. So thanks. Just a comment.
Thanks, Tony.
If I can just respond to that. The way that I'm understanding it is it's really not any additional taxes that these property owners would be paying because they're already paying those property taxes and it's going to the city. So it's in the property owner's best interest to support the TIF because then the DDA is receiving those tax captures that then are reinvested directly back into 3rd Street. So while they aren't paying any more, they are really helping to facilitate that additional development specific to the 3rd Street corridor. So I don't necessarily anticipate opposition from the 3rd Street property owners. I think the harder sell will be to the city in relinquishing those taxes to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's really on us as more so on Becky to really sell this in a way that this money is needed to promote this area. And to continue to develop it the way that it needs to be developed. And right now there's just a lack of funding. We're offering way more than what we're getting back for 3rd Street, especially. I think, Becky, you're 100% right, though. The business is, as long as we're educating them as far as all of the anyone that owns property on 3rd Street, as long as they're educated, understanding that their taxes aren't going up, we're just allocating funds differently and kind of putting them back where they need to go. There's not going to be an issue there. But like you said, I think it's just going to be a lot of selling to the city commission, county commission as well. But I do think ultimately everyone's going to be on board with this. I think that everyone understands the importance of this, especially if we show them the numbers and how much money it actually costs for us to maintain this district. I do think that we have the right people in place to kind of move forward and start this process. So.
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully and somewhat disagree that it's going to be mostly on Becky. I think it should be mostly on our board. When you have to go to the county commission, the city commission, start meeting with those commissioners, and once a plan is developed, I think it's up to our board to really get engaged with this, to be able to support what Becky comes up with as, I mean, for lack of a better term, a master plan to develop and sell. I hate the term sell, but it really kind of is. So I think it's up to all of us to step up and help when that time comes.
Yeah, I would agree.
It seemed to me before in discussions with Mike about this, that he was in agreement that the city would agree to support the TIF plan. And he wasn't quite sure about the county. And I think those are the two biggest, probably 95% of where the taxes, the library is kind of not a whole lot of money from that. So I think it's just the county that we really have to try and get on board more than the city. I can't see the city saying we won't do that for 3rd Street after we did it for downtown. And we can see the results of what's happened downtown compared to before the TIF plan was in place. So it's obviously really helped.
We got to stop calling it downtown. We're saying 3rd Street's downtown too.
I know. I knew you were going to say that, Jeremy. I could see that look in your eyes. Uptown and downtown.
There you go. That's nice. Anybody else? Oh, go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
I guess I'm kind of not sure on how this base year works. And, so let's say we adopt this in 2022. Does it start that year, or do you go back to a different base year and say, all right, we had $2 million of assessed valuation. Now, this year, I mean, how far back are you going to go on the base year, and do you get instant money for that then, like, put into your account, so to speak, between if you have $150,000 difference? How does that work, Christina?
Yeah, so your base year, so it'd be that that taxing year. So for instance, much of the the audit boards close out in March, which then you're setting your new your new fiscal year, right? For are you a July through June fiscal year?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So for instance, what's being set right now for taxes and payments, you will see those taxes in your fiscal year ending 2022. So if your base year is 2021 right now, any type of growth that would happen wouldn't happen until after 2022, because you've already set your taxes for this year and what's going to be collected. So you would see your first growth, if there is growth, in 2023.
Okay. And then as far as bonding or anything like that, is there any kind of a formula that you can bond a certain amount of the income you have coming in from the tax?
I am probably not the best person to talk about the bonding. I would say that for that, I would recommend, speaking with your finance director with the city, because it is going to be dependent on your bond rating as a city, and what is the project. I mean, you can bond against, obviously, the 20-year projection of your TIF plan. However, you need to then keep in mind is you need to be able to pay on that annual bond. So do you have enough to pay on that, either through your other TIF or other sources of revenues for that? So or perhaps there's an agreement that you have in place with other partners too.
Okay.
Anyone else? Questions? Well, I'll take that as a no. I guess from all of us, Christina, I just want to say thank you. This was a more than informative discussion. I mean, this has been something that even, since all of these guys that are on the board, Tony and Jim, that have been here longer than me, and anyone that's newer here, it's been a topic of discussion forever. I mean, and since 3rd Street's kind of come on board and starting this process out, I know that we had a ton of questions, and I think you answered a lot of those and are kind of giving us a direction here of kind of what to do. And I think it's a great step forward for us, and we certainly couldn't do it without the information you gave us. So once again, thank you.
Oh, you're
Very
welcome.
nice job.
Happy to help. And Rebecca knows how to get a hold of me if she has other questions along the way. I just want to say good luck with the process. Know that it will take, a good amount of time. I would plan, at least 6 months to a year to work through the process really thoroughly. And by thoroughly is, doing all those community meetings and those one-on-ones with the county and your council. So take the time to do it. Don't rush the process, because if you're trying to hit a timeline at the end, you'll find that you'll probably misstep. So, be patient with the process.
Good advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess with that, we can kind of move on. Let me make sure that there's no one here for public comment. Is that correct, Becky?
That's correct. I don't see anybody.
Before I adjourn the meeting, I guess one of the things I just want to bring up, since I know that the people that are on here are kind of especially when I speak of Jim and Tony, the ones that are kind of most invested in this, and Tony's going to be leaving us unfortunately soon. But I do wonder if it makes a lot of sense for us to have an ad hoc subcommittee to kind of oversee this process. So I kind of want everyone to think about that a little bit before our next meeting, and Becky, you as well. It may be something that's beneficial for us to kind of put some people that are really kind of directed on this task and kind of steered in the right direction. That way you have a direct line of communication yourself, Becky. And I know that we would probably have, maybe everyone on the board wants to commit to helping out with it, which is great. But I think, unless I'm wrong, I do see value in ad hoc committee. What do you guys think?
I agree, Jeremy. And I think another thought that came to mind is the possibility of some type of a press release that the DDA is learning more about TIF and the options. A well put together press release, and maybe Christina, and by the way, you did a fine job. I don't know if Christina would agree with that, but even this early, we could let the public know and just plant some seeds that we're learning more about this in anticipation of the possibility of putting together this committee that you mentioned.
I think it's a great idea. I'd like to be on it, definitely.
Yeah, I would agree that, the more upfront you can be and transparent about what you're looking to do. And, just know that sometimes when you might come out with information that might startle a few people. So just be prepared for that back end and how you're going to be able to kind of respond to them even this early on. So.
Sure. Well, awesome. I guess with that, unless anyone else has any more comment, I'll let this thing end and adjourn this work session. We can certainly talk more about this at our next meeting, and really start to kind of get a plan moving along and have some really good discussions. So I look forward to all of that. At this point, I'll adjourn the meeting, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Thank
Hey,
you. Good meeting.
back.
As well.